Hello and welcome to the Hidalgo Show. I am your host, Rick Dehijo Binya, and today we're talking about Back to Goshen again, part 3. And today the episode is all about Goshen established 2019. How and what are the procedures to set up to get ready to establish Goshen in 2019? We're going to talk about that today in detail right after this. Alright, well, welcome to the Hidalgo Show, and today we're going to talk about the things that you need to do to set up and establish your Goshen in 2019. And it's going to start with, as I've discussed many times before, the authentication process. Super important, and I'm actually going to go into explaining to you why it's so important today. This is not the Department of State's website. Just know that, okay? Don't go here. Don't waste your money here. You don't need this. You can go directly to the Department of State. Way cheaper, okay, than getting somebody to do it for you. Don't go here. But I want to use this to show you something. All right? I want to show you here, what is the difference between an apostille and authentication for documents? Okay, there's a detailed list of countries that fall under the apostille process, which was established by the Hague Convention. Currently, there are 97 countries that require this process be adhered to with all official documents, including birth or marriage certificates, school transcripts, court documents, divorce decrees, and other local, state, and federal court-issued documents. If you want something to be admissible, if you want something to be considered authentic, to be considered true, something that you can advise a body of, that is authenticated, that is stood behind by the Department of State of the United States of America, then this is a process that you need to go through. We're going to get into the details of what it actually means here in a minute. But let's continue reading. The Department of State authentication process for non-apostille countries is conducted by the U.S. Department of State as well. There are 81 countries that do not subscribe to the Hague Convention, but still need to have official documents verified in order to be used in those countries. The process is similar to obtaining an apostille. However, it requires the additional embassy legislation by the embassy of the country in which the document is being presented. U.S. Authentication Services takes care of the embassy legalization step for your documents. So rather than having to go to, say, Taiwan, which or the Philippines, which are neither one Hague nations, you would go to the Department of State and they would take care of it for you. Now, why would you want it done in a non-Hague nation? Well, The Hague has a treaty. There's a treaty of how all of those different countries are to be communicated with, and tax treaties and all kinds of different treaties that these nations all have together. So you might say they're all under one umbrella. But on countries that have not participated in The Hague are not under such treaty, and by getting your document authenticated for one of those 81 countries that have not subscribed to the Hague Convention, you're essentially saying that you're having your documents authenticated for a non-Hague or a foreign country. See, countries that are part of the Hague are not necessarily foreign in the eyes of the corporation. Corporation meaning the corporate United States, the functioning oligarchy of the United States is a corporation. And that corporation has tentacles. Those tentacles go to 97 countries. And those are all under the Hague Convention. The Hague is the new Babylon. But there are still plenty of countries that do not subscribe to the Hague Convention. And you want to get your documents authenticated for one of those countries. I always use Taiwan because I have friends in Taiwan, and so it just makes it easy for me. So, just to give you a clue, what other types of documents need to be apostilled or authenticated? Here's you can read between the lines here, and I'll help you do it. Besides the list above, there are other important documents which need to go through the apostille or authentication process by the United States or Department of State, which include, I want you to pay close attention here to what I just read. There are, besides the list above, there are other important documents which need to go through the apostille or authentication process. Need. Now, why need? What does apostilling or what does authentication do? Alright, first of all, let's look at the types of documents that they suggest that one has apostilled or authenticated. Power of attorney. That is vital if you're acting as an authorized agent on behalf of another party in foreign business. Think about that for a second. That creature that was created at your birth, is he not an agent? Are you not foreign to that agent? And because you're foreign to that agent, do you want to act on behalf of a foreign party? Sometimes it's beneficial. Secondly, commercial documentation. This includes any partnership agreements, incorporation documentation, articles of association, corporate meetings minutes, other corporate or commercial documents used for international business. Now, this is for Babylon. Remember, in Goshen, we don't incorporate. Okay, so this is for Babylon. Third, any documents issued by the U.S. federal government, any of their agencies, including the FBI, Department of State, FBI fingerprint clearance, or FBI clearance certificates, police clearance certificates. Think about it. These are all things that you would want to have authenticated so that it's admissible and that there's the full weight of the United States stands behind you. Education credentials such as university diplomas, transcripts, high school diplomas, letters of work experience, etc. Does anybody ever get those authenticated? Do they have any value if you don't authenticate them? Let's think about that. Consider this. Vital documents such as birth, marriage, divorce, are required to establish proofs of identity, marriage or birth. So, getting these authenticated or apostilled is required for identity. Think about that. It's required for identity. Now, if you hand somebody your birth certificate, does that really prove identity? Is there anybody really standing behind it? Are there witnesses behind it? There's one witness. That's the registrar on the paper. But what other witness is there? You see, there's a reason for this. And when you look at the document itself, you're going to see even more. So, let's go to the document now. This is my heir apparent. And this is his. Notice that there's a file number at the top. And it has been grommeted together up in the left-hand corner. There's a grommet. They will seal them together so that they can never be separated. And here is what they say. To all whom these presents shall come greetings. I certify that the document hereunto annexed, go look that word up, is under the seal of the states of Florida, and that such seal are entitled to full faith and credit. Because this is my son's, and my son was born in Florida. This was his birth certificate, his certificate of live birth that I was getting annexed. So here's an asterisk for the contents of the annexed document. The department assumes no responsibility. This certificate is not valid if it is removed or altered in any way whatsoever. There's our seal. You just rub a little carbon paper on it and it just comes out really nice. You can photocopy it and it stands out. In testimony whereof I, John F. Carey, Secretary of State, have hereunto caused the seal of the Department of State to be affixed in my name subscribed by the Assistant Authentication Officer of the said department at the City of Washington in the District of Columbia this 17th day of October 2016. And there's John Kerry's signature, and there's his assistant officer's signature underneath it. Witnessed by two. What does the scripture say? At the mouth of two or three a matter is established, correct? Okay, and now I want you to notice these laws in the corner right here. These are what the excuse me a second here. These laws is what this document is in pursuance of. Okay, what you're going to find out is that it makes it evidence. Okay, this document, anything attached to it is going to become evidence. First of all. Second of all, there's a statute in there that actually talks about that an authenticated document is just as the original. And if you're going to make a claim on something, would you not want to make a claim on the original? It's just kind of common sense. So when I advocate for people to authenticate, I'm not doing it out of some patriot myth. This is not a patriot myth. This is a way of correcting a subversion. Because at your birth, an entity was created with a name like yours, but its appellation was in all capital letters, and it continues to be on everything that you receive from this corporation. It's on your driver's license, it's on your social security number, your card, it's on your library card, it's on your voter's ID, your voter's registration card, it's on everything you get. It's on your credit cards, it's on everything. When you get a bill from a utility under this corporation, it is in the all capital letter appellation. What it is suggesting is that all of these things are being billed to this entity, not to you, but to this entity for which you serve as agent. Now, when you take hold of this entity and begin to control it, and there's some other things that you would need to do to get absolute control, okay, which we will get to. But this is the very first step. This is what you do. This is not a difficult process. You literally take a certified copy of your certificate of live birth that you get from the health department or from the state that you were born in, or even sometimes you can get them from the county where you were born. And you order one of those. Okay, you take that and you send it to the state that you were born in, and you attach a letter stating that you wish to have this document authenticated for Taiwan. Well, they know that Taiwan is a non-Hague country and that they are required to authenticate that document because Taiwan is not a Hague country and does not accept documents that are apostilled, but rather they accept authenticated documents. That's what they're used to seeing. So your state, Secretary of State or Department of State will do that for you, and they will send it back stapled to the front of your certificate of live birth. It generally costs some states $5, some states all the way up to $20, $25. So you have to look at your particular state to see what it is they charge. In Florida, it's $10. So then you take that and you send that up to the federal level, and you'll find that the Authentication Services Department at the federal level is in Sterling, Virginia. They have a very peculiar address. It's a bunch of numbers and letters and an ununderstood sequence. And you send it there. And what they'll do is they'll put this form, this affidavit, on top of what your state did, and they'll stick a grommet in there. That's this little contraption here, up in the top corner. And they will seal it all together with that. They will bind them, and when you get it back, it'll be 3 sheets of paper bound together by this grommet. And which is why I advise people to make scans of their document along the way, because once they've bound these together, it is very difficult to make copies of the other documents that are bound to this, that are annexed to the document. It's difficult because it is tightly bound, and though you can turn it, you'll never get a full page scan. It'll be very difficult to get a scan. So I suggest when you get a certified copy of your certificate of live birth, go ahead and scan that puppy right away. When you get it back from your state that you were born in, scan that puppy right away. And then when you get it back from the State Department in Sterling, Virginia, I would advise you to scan this one into your records as well. So then you'll always be able to deliver a certified, or a copy of this record to whoever is asking, or whoever it is you feel that you need to advise. Okay, so that's what it looks like. This is actual one in my house that I've filed into my private files. Okay, this is my scan. So that is the authentication process. Now let's go look at step 2. All right, so let's move on to an affidavit of ownership. And in case you never heard of an affidavit of ownership, it's basically a document that's used to place on top of a deed, a certificate of title, or something of the sort that that basically proves in a more conclusive way by the language in it that you've taken a claim over certain property. Okay, well, if you think about your birth certificate is a property document. It does have property on it. Because the all capital appellation appears on it, that is actually a fictional property. And that property at the moment, if you have not already been authenticated and you've already not drawn up a affidavit of ownership, what you are right now is a slave to Babylon. Babylon can legally force you into obeying their rules, their codes, their statutes, because they administrate your fictional corporation, the one that's deeded in your name. So what many people have done now, and this is only logical, is you place an affidavit of ownership over the top of it, and in that affidavit of ownership you explain that you are the owner of this document because your name appears in the document. Okay, and because your name appears there, it denotes that you're one of the holders in due course of that document. So your mother, your father, and yourself are the three who are listed on that document. Therefore, those three individuals are the only three individuals that can claim that they have a ownership over you. So this is the next step to overcoming the Babylonian presumptivism system. So we want to escape the Babylonian presumptivism. You're going to have to get authenticated and then put an affidavit of ownership. I'm going to show you a little further too here. So Google's got this cool little thing where they tell you, where they come up with questions like, how do you prove ownership of personal property? Let's look at this right here. Okay, they got a 7-point list. They say first get a copy of the deed to the property. Well, what's the deed to the property? Well, the deed to the property is going to be the certificate of live birth. Produce copies of purchase documents. Okay, well, this isn't something that you have to purchase. You own it, or you have a controlling interest in it, at least from the start. Use a certificate of title for a mobile home. Gather property tax receipts. Get copies of mortgage payment records. Provide proof of homeowner's insurance in your name. And then the final step is complete an affidavit of ownership. So these are some tips on how you can prove ownership. Now, you can use these same things to prove that you have ownership over yourself. Who feeds you? Right? Who feeds you? Who puts you up? Who houses you? Who works in order to support you? These are all things that you could gather together, and you can make a record, a clear record and clear claim that you, in fact, do own this corporate fiction. So I wanted to show you that because I think it was appropriate that Google posed that question. How do you prove ownership of personal property? And then what is a certificate of ownership? Well, so a certificate of title is a state or municipal issued document that identifies the owner or owners of personal property or real property. Well, are you identified on the document, or are the creators of that were involved in creating you, were they named on the document? Of course they were named on the document. So this is legitimately a type of certificate of title, even if it's not necessarily property or real property, because the argument would be, well, it's exclusively prohibited for you to be property in accordance with the 13th or the 14th Amendment. Well, and as true as that may be, there is always the possibility of voluntary servitude, and in many ways that's the way that they get you to participate in Babylon, is by having you to volunteer into it, by buying into the benefits of Babylon, or or causing you to believe that you have to. Okay? These are all very common factors in how people get themselves all tied up into the Babylonian presumptivism system. So with that being said, then what you're going to do is, on top of that, many of us have done this, and I would encourage everyone to do it. This is the definition of a counter deed. So what you do is, as a cover page over the top of the affidavit of ownership, which is of course on top of the grommeted, authenticated paperwork that you get back from the State Department, okay, on the very top you put a cover sheet called the counter deed, and you actually put that language in here. You actually write this definition there. A counter deed is a secret deed that is executed before a notary or under a private seal. Okay, so what else do you need as a private capital C citizen? What do you need? You need a private seal. A counter deed destroys, invalidates, voids, or alters a public deed. It alters it. Okay? So what are you doing? You are altering it. In what way are you altering it? You are taking ownership. You are saying, I am the responsible party. Okay? And I'm taking ownership. And now you can choose whether to use this entity or not. You now have a choice. And that is going to be the subject of another show, as that's a lot more complicated and is a lot more detailed. And frankly, I really don't want to go into it over a public venue. Okay, so I will probably put that on Patreon, and you'll have to be a paid member to get it, because it's too sensitive, and it's something that literally, if you don't do it right, you can really mess yourself up. But it is it's totally legit. It is how you operate in the ways of the Lord, and that is ultimately our goal. Remember, we've been teaching all this time, there's only two ways. There's the ways of the world and the ways of the Lord, and we are seeking the ways of the Lord. We're no longer interested in the ways of the world. So with that said, I'm going to thank all of you for watching. Thank you all for listening. If you are a Patreon member, thank you very much for all of your contributions. If you are not currently a Patreon member and you would like to be a Patreon member, sign up at patreon.com/House of Hidalgo Show and sign up at one of the levels. I would recommend $5 or above per month in order to get the content that I'll be putting on there shortly. And other content that I've already put on there that is for $5 or more contributors on Patreon. If you want to just support my channel by just passing around the word, that's fine too. We have a Facebook page. Go and like the Hidalgo Show on Facebook, or you can go and find our YouTube page, and which is probably where you're listening to us now. That's where most of my listeners are. And you can go to YouTube and you can subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications when new videos come out. All right. With that said, I have also a couple other options. You can write me at the address that's on your screen. You can send me things that you would like me to open on the show, and I will gladly open it on the show. Don't have to mention your name. If you don't want your name mentioned, just say so. Also, I have an email address. If you want to reach me at my email address, then reach me at the address that's on the screen, the Gmail address on the screen, so that we can correspond and you can get my information that way as well. So there's lots of ways to reach me, lots of ways to participate in the Hidalgo show, and I thank you all for listening. And I've got to remind you, as I do every week, that everything we do for one reason and one reason only, and that is, it's all about the blood.